Jackie MacMullan joins us from ESPN. Yesterday I found out that your mother was British.
Yes, she is.
How did your parents meet?
So my mom grew up in Keston, Kent, outside of London, and she was wanted to be a model. So she was a governess for a family in Spain, and she came over to Miami, Florida with them from Spain and became a model at Burdines department store. And someone saw her picture in a magazine, and she got a modeling job in New York City.
Wow.
And my dad is born and raised in Queens, New York City all the way. So my mom met my dad's cousin Dennis, and she was on a date at a party with my dad's cousin, and my dad just stole her away.
What Britishness has rubbed off on you?
Well, this isn't even a plot. This isn't even a plant. This is a Yorkshire Gold tea bag. I send away for these.
Really?
I'm a tea snob. I only drink British tea. I'm kidding. You think I'm kidding? Every day when I came home from school at 3:30, we had tea and biscuits. And I mean every single day after school.
What's your go-to biscuit when you go to England?
I love, what are they called?
Custard
the shortbread. The shortbread.
Oh,
ones.
shortbread. Very nice.
I like the shortbread.
So your dad read the Globe and the Herald pretty much every day, right?
He did, and all the New York papers because he's a New Yorker.
Do you remember the first time you read a newspaper? How old you were?
I don't remember how old I was, but I'm sure I was very young because my dad was such a big newspaper fan, and my dad was my favorite person. So I wanted to be just like him. So he would bring home these papers. He was a traveling salesman, and he spent a lot of time all over, really New England and New York. And so he'd always be reading the New York Post. That was his favorite because, Dick Young was a famous columnist at the New York Post. So I grew up reading the back page of the New York Post, and I was probably, 9 or 8 or 9, something like that.
But you were a hockey junkie, right? Did your dad buy you an outdoor goal, was it?
He did. So yeah, my dad, I liked to play street hockey. I was a tomboy. I used to just play all day with the boys, whatever they were playing, I wanted to play. And our neighborhood in particular, because the Bruins were very popular then with Bobby Orr, we played street hockey all day long. And most of the boys my age were used to me playing with them. I had grown up playing with them. But some of the older boys started coming around to play in those games, and they didn't want me to play. And so they kind of tried to shove me out of the game. And so my dad, for Christmas, gave me a hockey net. Now, back when we were kids, nobody had a hockey net. You used 2 cans, and you scored a goal between the 2 cans. So the only way they were going to get to use my hockey net was if I got to play. So you see, my dad's very intelligent.
Has that happened in the media at all? Or did it when you started, that the whole idea of being surrounded by males and being pushed out a little bit?
Not really. I was very fortunate to start my career at the Boston Globe around a bunch of professionals who I think very early on, listened to me, asked me questions, and realized, okay, she loves sports, she knows sports, because I was just as big a sports junkie as they were. So, Will McDonough and Lee Montville and Bob Ryan and all these wonderful people, Peter Gammons, I learned so much from them, and they became very protective of me. So I think if I had worked somewhere differently, someplace different, it might have been not as wonderful an experience. But I also had bosses that weren't just, no one was allowed to mess with me.
Dead time on commercial planes. That doesn't happen anymore.
No.
What's your favorite story or time with a player that you had on a flight like that?
Well, actually, it wasn't me. I just saw it, though. So back when the Celtics used to fly commercial, Larry Bird was playing, and we were in Milwaukee, and there used to be an airline called Midwest Express, and it was a lovely airline. It went Boston to Milwaukee, nonstop, the only one, and they served hot chocolate chip cookies on every flight. But we're trying to get out of Milwaukee, and it's delayed. And they don't have a lounge. Like all the major airlines had these private lounges where the players could go in out of sight of everybody. But Midwest Express didn't have that. So here's poor Larry Bird in the Milwaukee airport. Yeah, stuck here. People are coming up to him, and he doesn't like that. He's really kind of has a little bit of social anxiety, actually, around crowds and such. So this young guy, I'll never forget it, he came up to Larry and he said, "Larry, you want to play cribbage?" And Larry said, "Yes." So this kid set up the cribbage board and played cribbage with Larry for like an hour. Like Larry's like another game, because by doing that, when people came up, they didn't want to, he would say, "Oh, we're in the middle of a game," so they couldn't bother him.
That's genius.
Isn't it? It was really smart. I always wondered who that young boy was. He got really lucky.
He's got a story for life.
He does.
So do you. I read somewhere as well that Red Auerbach originally didn't want you in the locker room.
Right, he didn't want any of us in the locker room, any of the females. And I wasn't the first one. There was a woman before me, Leslie Visser, who he was very close with. In fact, he attended her wedding. But he still doesn't want her in the locker room either. But
what did he say? Why?
Well, he just thought women didn't belong in the locker room. It was uncomfortable for both the women and the men. And I said, look, I don't want to be in either, but it has to be equal. I have to be able to have the same advantages as you do if I'm trying to do my work. And so, I don't think he had ever really thought about it. So what he did was he bought bathrobes for all the players. And so when we came in after the game, the players would be in bathrobes. And that made everybody feel better.
What kind of basketball player were you? Playing college, University of New
Yeah,
Hampshire?
so I started playing very late. Not till my junior year of high school, so very, very, very late. I was not a thing of beauty when I played, but I played really hard, and I was a pretty good defensive player. I was a great rebounder. That was probably the thing I was best at. I had a funny one-handed kind of herky-jerky shot.
You were a southpaw?
Yes, left-handed.
Nice.
And but I actually became a much better player after I was done with college because I was so far behind everybody. By the time I was in my mid-20s, I was really playing great. But by then, of course, my career was over.
Is it true that you once drove in Larry Bird's car?
It is true. Wow, you've done your homework. I was at Larry's house. I was working on a book with him, and I needed to go into the office of the Pacers to look at some of the. And he said, "Well, here he was going to be somewhere else." He said, "Just take my car." Well, he drove this Mercedes. It was a tank. It was like a huge Mercedes, and so I went to go back it out and to drive it, and I think I got like halfway down the street, and I just panicked. I'm like, I'm going to smash up Larry Bird's 90,000 Mercedes. So I put it back in the garage, and I took a cab.
The one story I really liked from you was Ray Allen, about all of his OCD, he can't
Yes.
walk past paper,
Right.
the toothpaste story. Mm-hmm. How do you manage to get so much detail out of somebody?
Well, it's years and years of practice, honestly. And I think by the time I did that story with Ray, we had known each other probably almost 15 years, and I had probably written a lot about him. And he mentioned that he was very persnickety. And so we had enough of a relationship that I could say, well, what do you mean? He said, well, I need everything just exactly. I said, give me an example. And so I don't think if I was interviewing for the first time, that probably wouldn't have worked. But because we knew each other quite well, he felt comfortable telling me some of those. And I had interviewed people in advance of talking to him. And one of the stories that Jim Calhoun, his college coach, told me that he roomed with Travis Knight, I think it was, who played at UConn. And Travis was a slob. And the thing that bothered Ray Allen the most was Travis would squeeze the toothpaste from both ends. And that drove him crazy because if you're, OCD, you fold it up very carefully and so that drove him crazy. So that gave me the idea that, okay, there's some quirky things about Ray.
I don't think I could live with Ray.
No, nor could I.
He couldn't live with me, probably.
Well, and Ray had a hard time interacting with his teammates because of that too. And you've seen it come out a little bit, in Pierce's retirement, how he was always a little bit apart from the rest of the team, and I think that's partly why.
Final question. You always say that you like to take someone down a road and you're not really sure where you're going with it.
Right.
What's the quirkiest sort of road, as it were, that you've been down with a player or a coach, whoever it might be?
Well, I would say one of the most surprising ones was the linebacker, Teddy Bruschi, who played for the Patriots. I was going to do a story on him. He was having a great year. And I was always amazed at how aggressive he was on the field. And his eyes would be like bugging out of his head and he'd be, this violent player. And then afterwards, he was this very soft-spoken guy and had such great control off the field. And I was curious about exploring that and finding out how do you do that? Because I think that would be hard to be these two different people. And so he invited me to his home. His wife was there. I remember he was holding his newborn baby, Dante. He was like 8 weeks old. And again, this is trust that's built up over many years with Teddy. We've done stories together before. This was the first time he had invited me to his home. So I'm asking him this question, and he kind of looked at his wife, and then he didn't really answer me. He kind of sidestepped it a little bit. So I went away from it, and then asked him some other things, and then I came back around to it, because it was clear to me there was something to that. Anyway, long story short, what he admitted to me was when he was younger, he couldn't turn it off after the game, and he'd go out with the guys after the game, and he'd go out and he'd get really drunk, and he'd drive home drunk. And finally his wife, Heidi, said to him, if you continue with this, I'm not going to watch you kill yourself or kill somebody. I'm not going to stay with you. So in that story, in essence, Teddy Bruschi told the world he was an alcoholic.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting that when I went to his house.
Well, we appreciate your work and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Max. It's my pleasure.
Milk and sugar in that one?
Yes,
Yes?
always. Of course. It's British.